Hi, Meteorologist Lisa Green here with a look at what to expect as we head into fall. We're going to take an outlook at fall. This is unofficial, but we'll be taking a look at what we might end up seeing here as far as temperatures, as far as precipitation compared to our averages, and how, climate indicators may be a factor in how our fall shapes up as well. And it's already been feeling fall-like for us. Let's take a look at where we've been here this morning. It's back to school again today for some districts. Lisbon Public Schools went back today, and MSUM went back. Our college is starting to go back now. All classes resumed at MSUM, NDSU, and UND. I know it's a little bit later today where we see our evening classes come back. So we're going to see that potential for the cool temperatures to impact your experience while you're walking to class for that first time. So checking in on our first day outfit forecast, you might want to grab that sweatshirt, that hoodie before you head out the door, especially if you're going to evening classes tonight. You may want it. Our high today going to be around 70 degrees. Some of us are going to be more around mid 60s in Minnesota, where that colder core of air is currently located. But if you're in eastern North Dakota, you're more likely to see 70 degrees. So again, that extra layer might be needed later on today, and students definitely needed it this morning. Take a look at some of these lows that we saw today. This should actually be just say Monday lows. We saw some places, these are end-on sites, we saw some places well down into the 30s. Willow City, North Dakota, that's more north central North Dakota, as low as 33 degrees. Could have been some frost in some of these spots. Botno 35. In Minnesota, in our viewing area, Stephen got down to 35 at a North Dakota Agricultural Weather Network or NDON sensor. Roseau 36, Ada 36, and Fargo at the NDSU sensor. This is not at the airport, it's at NDSU. The sensor there did get down to 39 degrees. So it was a cool start today, certainly for a lot of places, the coolest we've seen in at least a few months in a lot of spots. Here's a look at low temperature map. You can see a lot of spots again into the 30s in Boston and Park Rapids, both checked in at 36 degrees for our low today. 39 in Langdon, Howlock got to 37, and more places, Mahnomen, Bemidji, 38, Wadena got down to 39, and so did Crookston. So lots of 30s on the map. At the airport in Fargo, it was 40. So that's a look at how cold it was this morning. Certainly got it feeling like fall. And here's an interesting statistic. On this date, on August 25th, this is an old record, but a record nonetheless, our coldest temperature record here is 32, and this is also the earliest freezing temperature we've seen in Fargo for this season. So from this point on, at least according to the record books, we can get below freezing, or at least hit the freezing mark in Fargo. And this was set way back in 1885. We have had a warming climate since then. So we'll see if we ever get back to that number in that August time frame, or at least early August. And one other thing I want to talk about is that average first frost or freeze, because we did get into frost range. So for Fargo, our average frost, and now a reminder, frost can be 36, maybe even 37 degrees in some instances. And it's not because anything's freezing at that exact temperature. It's that the air temperature is just that. It's taken in the air about 5 feet off the ground. So there can be variation between 5 feet and what's actually happening on the ground at the surface. It can be colder there. And so when we get into air temperature ranges of 36, we watch out for frost at that point on the ground. Not just on the ground, but it could be higher up on rooftops, that sort of thing. So again, there is the potential for frost at that number. And the average first frost for Fargo is September 20th. So that's a little, just under a month from now. And in Grand Forks, our average first frost is September 17th. Now there are some locations where the average first frost is the first week of September, and that's coming next week, so that's average. So being as cool as we have been in some locations this morning, it's not too far off in those northern valley areas. First freeze, that 28 to 32 degree mark, more into October for Fargo, and then the average is more into September 28th for Grand Forks. So that might, again, have you thinking about, okay, is this fall? and what's fall going to be like this year, this time around. So let's take a look. We first couple of days of fall, a reminder, fall is, for us from a meteorological standpoint, is starts on September 1st. I'll explain that in a moment. And you can see into the first few days, we'll pull this up full screen so you can see the whole thing. First few days of fall, in quotes here, is of course Labor Day. We're going to be on September 1st in the 70s. Average high for today's date, by the way, is 79 degrees. So remember, our averages are dropping over time. And so into September 1st, we'll be around average and even a little bit above into those first few days of September. So for at least first 4 days, trending at or above average. And you can see that I also want to point out that we do have some recovery from this cold morning. We'll be getting into upper 70s to even 80 by tomorrow and Wednesday. So back to more average and looking milder for Labor Day weekend coming up here. So for Labor Day itself and the weekend too, we'll be watching out for an isolated threat for some showers coming up here for us again. So let's take a look at now we're talking about our countdown to fall and looking at our fall outlook. So here's a look at what we first want to talk about here. So fall begins for us in the climate/meteorological world on September 1st. It encompasses the 3-month period of September, October, and November. Now, astronomical fall might be the kind of fall you're used to, which is more likely the months, or I should say, starting at the equinox and then ending at the winter solstice. And so that is more in line with the sun and the Earth's rotation around the sun. So the tilt of the Earth, of course, when we get to the equinox, the sun is directly overhead. So we get equinox means equal night in Latin, and that means equal day, equal night. So we're talking 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of nighttime. After that, the northern hemisphere is tilted away from the sun, and then we end up with, less daylight and more nighttime hours. So a reminder about that. And one other thing about that is that, the reason we do meteorological fall or climatological fall, that's because we often see the kind of weather associated with the season before we reach the equinox or before we reach the solstice. And, because we've already seen fall weather right now, and it's not even September yet. And technically, astronomical fall doesn't start till later in September, in the 20s, depending on the year. And so, we want to kind of be talking about the weather in line with, or the climate in line with the weather here. And in addition to that, for record keeping purposes, because we don't have we have 365, and a quarter days each year. That moves the calendar around. And also, not every single calendar month has the same number of days in the calendar. So it just makes it easier to just say, okay, this month, and this month, that's fall. And it helps us with our record keeping as well. Hopefully that makes sense. Long explanation to get to the point of we're counting September 1st as the first day of fall in this discussion. Okay, so let's take a look at some of our outlooks here. So we're going to start off with the month of of September. So this is from the Climate Prediction Center, and they're the experts. They're the climatologists looking at all of the climate indicators, all of the circulations that are going on around the globe that can influence our weather. And they are predicting that, look at the entire U.S. in orange or yellow here. So that means, according to the Climate Prediction Center, we're looking at the potential for seeing above average temperatures through the month of September is likely above average or leaning above average for the month. So here in the valley, our chances of being above average are a little lower. We're trending above average, but it's not as likely that we'll be above average for the month. But still, that possibility is greater that we'll see above average temperatures. A reminder, our average high on September 1st is 78. And then, as I was mentioning, our average highs drop as we go through the season. And so by September 30th, our average high is 65, and average lows 53 and 42 by the start of the month toward the end of the month. So again, September's looking milder than average. And then as we look at our precip outlook, You can see here green means above average precip associated with rain, and that's going to be more likely down into the Carolinas, into Georgia and Florida. And then below average for the Intermountain West for that area, or at least that's the outlook. Now again, this isn't a forecast. This isn't saying, yes, we're going to be above average. These color contours indicate our chances, our probabilities. So we have a greater chance of being above average, but it's not a guarantee, if that makes sense. And here in the valley, we are looking at no color on the map. That means all things being equal, our chances for above or below average precipitation right in the middle, equal chances of seeing an above or below average September for precip. So that doesn't really tell us a whole lot here for the month of September. Now let's talk about the next 3 months, which we consider to be the fall months, September, October, and November. And so this is through the end of November. A reminder, the astronomical start of winter is December 21st. We know we get winter weather before then. So again, this is why it makes more sense to break up these seasons this way. And so you can see we're still trending above average in our 3-month temperature outlook here, especially across much of the country, especially into the southwest yet again. The chances for being above average are a lot more likely in that area. But here in the valley, it's looking not as certain here. We're looking at equal chances above or below average temperatures in this area in North Dakota, most of the state, most of northwest Minnesota, and into Montana. And then slightly leaning above average. That chance for leaning above average is a little higher, but not by a lot, in the southern valley, and then down toward Minneapolis and down toward Sioux Falls. So we know we're looking at a pretty mild September likely as we head into the month, or at least above average September. But once we get into the other 2 months, October, November, there's a little less certainty, a little more room, a little opening here for the potential for more average conditions, or maybe even below average conditions, because again, equal chances of all three, above, below, or right in the middle, right into average. So again, we are looking at some uncertainty here in the valley. And then as far as precip outlook is concerned, September, October, November, you can see that we are leaning below average for precip. So looks like it could be hot and dry in the southwest, and it's already hot and dry in that area, so this would be even more so than usual, or average again, and then more wet conditions down toward Florida. So here in the valley, we are looking at the potential for either above or below or right at average precipitation, kind of right in the mix for each one. So equal chances means 33% chance that we're going to see above average precip, 33% chance we're going to see below, and a 33% chance will be right around average. So unfortunately, I don't have a clear picture for you for our chances for precip, whether it's going to be a wet fall or a dry fall necessarily here, at least from the Climate Prediction Center. So that's how that is looking. Again, this is through November. One thing I want to point out, this is our ranking percentile soil moisture coming in from NOAA. The map here showing, again, areas in green, looking higher soil moisture. Looks like I didn't make that larger, so we'll have to, maybe we'll bring this up full screen for you so you can see it a little bit better. So this is ranking percentile again. So you can see areas right in the heart of the tri-state area, Southern Valley. We had so much rain lately that we've got a lot of soil moisture there. And it's, again, very dry out to the west. And so we're in that 95th percentile in places along the North Dakota, South Dakota line, west central Minnesota. And when we have a lot of moisture in the soil, that can actually influence our weather somewhat. And so what it tends to do is be a moderator when it comes to temperatures. So our chances of really seeing extreme warmth are lowered. It moderates a warm air mass moving in. So that tends to keep temperatures perhaps a little bit cooler. And this is as of yesterday, as of August 24th, by the way. And in addition to that, more moisture in the soil can also help contribute to more moisture in the air, and that could help lead to precipitation too. So you might have heard this before: drought creates drought, and wet weather creates more wet weather. And we're certainly seeing that in the Southern Valley. Now, of course, northwest Minnesota has been on the drier side, so it's a different situation for you with soil moisture there below. So again, that could be a potential influence on our fall precip and temperatures in some areas in the Southern Valley. And so let's talk about La Nina. We'll pull this up full screen. We are currently under a La Nina watch. Now, if you've watched in the past, even as far back as last summer, I like to talk about ENSO, and that stands for El Nino, a Southern Oscillation. And what that is just a fancy way of talking about a global circulation that impacts our weather. And we say Southern Oscillation because it's focused in the Southern Pacific and equatorial areas as well. And what happens there can influence our weather here in North America because a warm ocean affects the atmosphere above it, and a cool ocean affects the atmosphere above it as well. And last year, we were going into a La Nina for the winter, if you remember us talking about that quite a bit. And when we were also talking about that last year, we also talked about how it was going to be a weak La Nina. And that tends to, and we saw it pretty much line up really well, that tends to lead to a warmer than average fall before we kind of see the bottom drop out. And then we really cool down into the heart of the winter months. And that pretty much, again, came to fruition last year. It doesn't mean it happens every time, but the possibility for that to happen is a little bit greater based on history and what we understand about La Nina. So we are now under La Nina watch. The expectation is that we will see La Nina conditions briefly develop and then switch back to neutral conditions. So we're going to talk about this and talk about the potential impacts here. A reminder about La Nina, again, this is focused in the Pacific Ocean. Normally trade winds are going to blow some of that warm surface water toward the west. And that's under neutral conditions. So those trade winds blow in from the east and they push that warm water out to the west. When those winds are even stronger, they tend to even push more of that warmer water westward, and that allows that colder air below to rise to the surface more. And so now we have a colder pool of ocean water here off the coast of South America. And again, when we have that, that influences the air above it, and that sets up circulations that tend to have a pretty strong signal for us here in the upper Midwest, especially during the winter time. There's a strong influence. And so this is a typical wintertime setup for La Nina. So what we tend to see is colder air because of the way the circulations happen. The air gets sent up north, and then it dives back down out of the northwest. And that leads to potential for more cold air outbreaks and just general cooler air masses over the valley over the course of the winter. And then with the Pacific jet coming in, that can introduce some moisture as well. So that is basically what we see during a typical La Nina winter. We're focusing on fall right now and what's going on with El Nino, La Nina right now. So here's a look, and this gets a little bit sciencey and nerdy, but here's a look. I'll pull this up full screen. So here's a look at some various climate models, various atmospheric models that show plots of what their predictions are. Again, these are simulations, so it is not a forecast, but it gives us an idea of trends. And if you see a bunch of models doing the same thing, then our chances of that thing happening look a little bit greater. So one thing I want to point out, we'll try to do this with my pointer arrow here. Okay, so this is 0. El Nino or La Nina, it measures sea surface temperature anomalies. And what that means is departure from average. So 0 would be considered average. So when you get to a ½ degree Celsius above average, the definition is that we're in El Nino because we're ½ degree warmer than average. And that doesn't sound like much, but that can really influence weather. And same thing for La Nina, ½ degree below 0 is, or below average is considered La Nina. And the farther down you go, the stronger the event is considered. So this is looking at, did I zoom in too much on this one? I'm going to go back and see if I can. Okay, so this is looking at the sea surface temperature anomalies. And what that means is departure from average. So when you get to a ½ degree Celsius above average, you the definition is that we're in El Nino because we're ½ degree warmer than average. And that doesn't sound like much, but that can really influence weather. And same thing for La Nina, ½ degree below 0 is, or below average is considered La Nina. And the farther down you go, the stronger the event is considered. So this is looking at, did I zoom in too much on this one? I'm going to go back and see if I can Sorry, guys. Okay, yeah, it zooms in too much, but because I wanted to show you the months here, and unfortunately, I don't have that set up that way. But I do want to point out that this mark here and then this mark here, those are considered observations. So we're close to zero. We're considered in what is ENSO, neutral. So neutral between El Nino and La Nina. And then from this point on is where the models are projecting. And again, each one of these, you can see them listed over here. Each one of these is a model. And you can see some of them and each one of these points is moving ahead a month during a 3-month average period. We'll explain that in a little bit in a graph that I actually set up a little bit better for you. But so each period, heading into the 3-month period. So these first few months here are considered more fall months and then heading into winter months here. And so you can see more models than not are trending us, below that neutral range. This is the neutral range, I should say. This dashed area between half below and half degree above, that's considered neutral. But we're on the low side of neutral. And some are bringing us below that half Celsius mark. And so that would put us in weak La Nina during that time, if we see this happen. And that's why we're under what's called a La Nina watch, because not entirely sure those conditions are going to happen, but we're seeing some signs that it's a possibility. And so we're looking at that being that possible factor. And the statistical average is that solid line, this thicker line of average of the models. So that can kind of help guide you a little bit here too. So we're getting dangerously close to a weak La Nina here in the coming months, according to these model plots. Now we're going to move ahead here to, and this might be a little more familiar to you. I've shown this before when we've been talking about El Nino, the outlook. Anywhere, these bars, what do they mean? Well, each one means chances of probability of La Nina is blue, cold, neutral, gray, and then El Nino, red, warm. And by the way, El Nino, I didn't explain El Nino that much, but El Nino is warmer. We would tend to, in the winter time, if we're being influenced by El Nino, we would tend to have milder than average conditions. Again, it doesn't happen every time, but it can be a strong influence on our winters. Okay, so looking at our outlook here, you can see, and here are the months I was talking about that I covered up, and these are considered seasons, so 3 months. JAS, July, August, September. August, September, October. So it moves ahead a month each time. September, October, November. And then October, November, December. So this would be considered summer into fall in our seasons here. And you can see what the probabilities are doing. We're looking at neutral, very likely here heading into fall. And then as we start moving our way into late fall, early winter time, we see a brief push for chances for La Nina coming up. And that kind of coincides with that graph we were just looking at. And then it's brief. And then it goes away again. And we move back into neutral conditions by the time we're perhaps December, January, February, which would be considered classic winter time, and then into late winter. Now, this isn't necessarily going to happen this way, but if it did happen, as we just talked about a little bit ago, we're talking about probabilities here again, so this isn't a forecast or a prediction, but when we are in a weak La Nina, if we do move into a weak La Nina here in the fall, it won't be exactly like last fall, but there is a chance. We've seen signs and signals that we could have warmer than average fall leading up to winter time during a weak La Nina. And again, that's if a weak La Nina develops. And then, if we start coming out of La Nina again, heading into the time when it would be kind of the heart of La Nina season, when its impacts would be greatest on us in the winter months, and we've already moved out of it, that might be nice too. Then we could get out of its influence before the worst of the season. That's if all this happens exactly how it's looking like the probabilities are showing. One thing to stress, though, is, this December, January, February period, these are probabilities. So the probability of staying in La Nina during that time is about the same as being neutral. And we're definitely not seeing El Nino making it come back anytime soon. The chances are a lot lower there. So I don't know if we're going to be seeing warm conditions developing in January. But we are, looking at La Nina kind of only coming for a little bit and then easing up if that scenario happens. And so that's kind of how the outlook is looking right now, is that, of course, for the months of fall, that we're looking either slightly trending above average or maybe more neutral because of the uncertainty of the influence of ENSO on our weather coming up for fall, and just kind of peeking ahead to winter a little bit here too. There is that potential we could see the winter months be more kind of neutral in the El Nino sense. And so that opens up the possibility for other climate influencers, other circulations, to have their influence on the valley here in the upper Midwest than, say, El Nino or La Nina. So then that brings about, more questions about what we're really looking at for wintertime. So still some uncertainty, certainly, with that. But that's how things are shaping up right now as far as our outlook is concerned for El Nino. So just to kind of recap here, our first alert fall headlines. For temperatures, we're leaning above average for especially early fall. But how long? Again, that could transition if we move into a La Nina period. And we're definitely, according to the climate experts, the Climate Prediction Center, there is more uncertainty as we head into the season. And then precipitation, not as clear cuts, and that's not even clear for our above average or below average chances. So precipitation going to be tougher to nail down here over the next few months, but we'll of course be tracking that for you. And then the influences of El Nino and La Nina here, and right now we again are under that La Nina watch for the winter, for that potential for La Nina conditions to develop, and for the possibility of that influencing our weather. But again, a weak La Nina is going to have less strong influence than what a strong La Nina would, and I'm sure that makes sense. And so, we're during a La Nina, if it sticks around through winter time, if we see it develop, that may influence our weather and bring our average temperatures down a little bit. And it may also potentially bring our not have much influence on our temperatures here as well as we're looking ahead into the season. Sorry, I'm just checking to make sure that we don't have any important questions to answer here as I'm looking at my Facebook Live. Eric Whitehill, our storm chaser, commented that it's a good thing he can get his PSL, his pumpkin spice latte at Starbucks starting tomorrow morning. It definitely has been feeling like fall here. And looking ahead to fall again, looking at potential for milder than average fall, but not a 100% guarantee. And as far as winter goes, we'll have to keep an eye on things and see if La Nina develops or doesn't develop in the next couple of months, and that will help paint the picture for what we might see during the winter season. So hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments on Facebook, and we've got this live stream on Facebook, it's on YouTube, and of course on Valley News Now. And we're looking at warmer temperatures. If you've missed summer this weekend and feeling nervous about fall coming a little sooner than you'd like, we've got warmer temperatures ahead this week, as we were talking about, just in time for Labor Day. Summer's, last hurrah, Labor Day weekend. I think it's going to be pretty decent. We'll just have to watch out for some chances for some rain coming up. And after today, not nearly as chilly in the morning hours, with some warmer temperatures to come this week too. So in the meantime, we'll of course be keeping you up to date on our fall outlook and our winter outlook too as the season gets closer. And stick with us. We'll keep you up to date with the forecast for the day and, again, a look for the months ahead coming up for the colder season to come.